property you think you own is actually being held hostage by a 3-digit decimal point. It's called the 1.20 trap. By the end of 2026, it is mathematically guaranteed to trigger the largest legal property seizure in American history. Most people believe that if they pay their mortgage and keep their tenants, their bank will refinance their loan. They think interest rates are the only enemy. They believe their payment history is their protection. But here is what the headlines aren't telling you. Your payment history is irrelevant. Your credit score is secondary. There is a black magic mechanism called the refinancing eligibility gap. Even if you are a perfect borrower, your bank is legally barred from rolling over your debt if your property doesn't hit a specific mathematical threshold. You see, the system doesn't care about your loyalty. It cares about your ratio, which means in the next 18 months, millions of property owners will discover that the rules changed while they were sleeping. The trap was set in 2022. The deadline is 2026, and the math has already decided who survives. Today, I'm breaking down the 3-part mechanism that is currently locking trillions of dollars in real estate into a refinancing death spiral. First, the maturity wave that most analysts are calling a wall. Second, the 1.20 ratio that your bank won't tell you about. Third, the legal fingerprint that allows your regional bank to seize your capital to save itself. A mandatory protocol before we open the file. This is not financial advice. I'm not a licensed advisor. The math follows a script, but your capital is your responsibility. Always conduct your own research. The number is $957 billion. That's how much commercial real estate debt matures in 2025 alone. Not in a decade, not over the next 5 years, in 1 year. You see, this isn't a one-time wall. It's a maturity wave, and it doesn't peak until 2027 when $1.26 trillion in loans hit their expiration date. Which means the pressure isn't sudden, it's cumulative. Every quarter, another tranche of loans reaches maturity. Every quarter, another group of property owners discovers their bank won't extend. The data breaks down like this. 35% of hotel loans are hitting the deadline right now. 24% of office property loans are in the same maturity window. These aren't fringe assets. These are the core holdings of pension funds, regional banks, and private equity portfolios. Plus, the loans that were modified in 2022 and 2023 have run out of time. Back then, banks used a strategy called extend and pretend. They rolled over distressed loans with minimal underwriting, betting that interest rates would drop and property values would recover. The bet failed. Interest rates didn't drop. Property values didn't recover. And now, those extended loans are hitting their final maturity date. There is no third extension. There is no fourth modification. You see, the system gave borrowers a grace period. That grace period expires in 2026, which means every loan that was kicked down the road in 2022 is now facing the 2026 interest rate reality. The old loan had a rate of 3.5%. The new loan requires a rate of 7.2%. Your debt service just doubled. But even if you can afford the higher payment, your bank still won't refinance you. Because the problem isn't whether you can pay. The problem is whether your property can pass the new underwriting standard. The standard is 1.20. If your property doesn't hit that ratio, your loan dies at maturity. Your equity dies with it. And your bank has the legal authority to take your deposit to cover the loss. Most property owners are staring at this wave and treating it like a negotiation. They think they can call their banker, show their payment history, and get another extension. They're wrong. The wave isn't a negotiation. It's a mathematical filter. And the filter has already decided who gets refinanced and who gets foreclosed. If this maturity mechanism just clicked for you, or you want to track these commercial real estate triggers as they happen in real time, join the Forensic Circle by hitting subscribe. We don't do headlines, we do the fine print. But even this $957 billion wave is a distraction from the real trap. Because the maturity date is just the deadline. The ratio is the weapon. And in the next section, I'm breaking down the exact mathematical threshold that is currently locking property owners out of the refinancing market, even if they have perfect credit and 0 missed payments. The 1.20 trap isn't a theory. It's a line in your bank's underwriting manual, and it's about to become the most expensive decimal point in your life. The maturity wave tells you when your loan expires. The ratio tells you whether you survive. The ratio is called Debt Service Coverage Ratio, DSCR. It's a 3-letter code that determines whether your bank can legally refinance your property. And in 2025, the threshold was raised to 1.20. You see, most property owners have never heard of DSCR. They focus on loan-to-value ratios or credit scores, but your bank doesn't care about those metrics anymore. Your bank cares about one number. Can your property generate enough income to cover its debt and still have a 20% cushion? Which means the formula is simple. DSCR equals net operating income divided by total debt service. Net operating income is your rental income minus your operating expenses. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, management fees, everything except your mortgage payment. Total debt service is your annual mortgage payment, principal plus interest. The math looks clean, but the trap is in the threshold. A DSCR of 1.0 means your property generates exactly enough income to cover its debt. No buffer, no margin for error. A DSCR of 0.9 means your property is losing money every month. You're covering the shortfall out of pocket. A DSCR of 1.20 means your property generates 20% more income than it needs to service the debt. That 20% is your safety margin. You see, banks don't lend into scenarios where the borrower is living paycheck to paycheck. They lend into scenarios where the asset can survive a recession, a vacancy spike, or an interest rate shock. Which means 1.20 isn't a suggestion. It's the legal minimum for refinancing in 2026. Plus, this threshold isn't new. It's been the standard for decades. But in the 2010s, during the era of cheap money, banks relaxed their underwriting. They approved loans with DSCRs as low as 1.10 or even 1.05. The assumption was simple. Interest rates would stay low forever. Property values would keep rising. And borrowers could always refinance into better terms before the loan matured. The assumption was wrong. Interest rates rose from 3% to 7% between 2022 and 2023. Your debt service doubled. You see, if you took out a $10 million loan at 3.5% in 2019, your annual debt service was roughly $350,000. If you refinance that same loan at 7.2% in 2026, your annual debt service jumps to $720,000, which means your DSCR just collapsed. Let's run the math on a real property. You own a small office building. Your net operating income is $500,000 per year. Under your old loan, your debt service was $350,000. Your DSCR was 1.43. You had a 43% cushion. Your bank was happy, but now your loan matures. You need to refinance at 7.2%. Your new debt service is $720,000. Your DSCR is now 0.69. You see, your property didn't change. Your tenants didn't leave. Your income didn't drop. But your ratio collapsed because the cost of your debt doubled, which means you are mathematically ineligible for refinancing. Your bank won't touch you, not because you're a bad borrower, not because you missed payments, but because the math no longer works. Plus, even if your NOI was high enough to cover the new debt service, you still wouldn't qualify. Because covering the debt isn't enough. You need a 20% buffer. This is where the real trap lives. Let's say your property generates enough income to push your DSCR to 1.05. You're covering your debt. You're even generating a 5% cushion. By any reasonable standard, you should be eligible for refinancing. But you're not. You see, 1.05 puts you in what underwriters call no man's land. You're solvent, but you're not safe. And in 2026, banks are tightening their standards. They're not interested in solvent. They're interested in bulletproof. Which means if you're below 1.20, you are automatically rejected. The rejection isn't personal, it's procedural. Your loan application gets flagged by the bank's risk management algorithm before a human even looks at it. The algorithm sees your DSCR. The algorithm sees 1.05. The algorithm outputs a single word, denied. Plus, this isn't limited to distressed properties. Even high-performing assets are getting caught in the gap. If your property is in a market where rents are flat or declining, your NOI stagnates. If your operating costs rise due to insurance hikes or property tax increases, your NOI shrinks. Either scenario pushes your DSCR below 1.20. You see, the gap isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of mathematical compression. The system is squeezing margins, and the squeeze is intentional. If you can't refinance, your loan defaults at maturity. The default isn't a missed payment. It's an expiration. Your loan reaches its maturity date. Your bank demands full repayment. You can't pay the full balance. The bank forecloses. You see, most people assume foreclosure only happens if you stop making payments. But maturity default is different. You can have a perfect payment history. You can be current on every obligation. But if your loan matures and you can't refinance, the bank seizes the asset, which means your equity disappears. Let's say you bought your property for $10 million. You put down $2 million. You borrowed $8 million. Over the years, you paid down $1 million in principal. Your equity is now $3 million. But your loan matures in 2026. Your DSCR is 1.08. The bank denies your refinancing application. The bank forecloses. The property sells at auction for $8 million. The bank recovers its $7 million loan balance. The remaining $1 million goes to closing costs, legal fees, and auction expenses. You get nothing. Your $3 million in equity evaporated because you missed the 1.20 threshold by 0.12. Plus, the only way to avoid this outcome is to inject fresh capital. You need to pay down your loan balance to the point where your DSCR hits 1.20. For most properties, that means injecting anywhere from $500,000 to $3 million in cash equity. You see, banks call this a loan buy-down. You're essentially paying the bank to reduce your debt so your ratio improves. If you can't come up with the cash, you're forced to bring in a partner. The partner injects the capital. The partner takes a percentage of your ownership. Your equity gets diluted, which means you either lose your property to foreclosure or you lose your ownership percentage to a capital partner. Either way, the 1.20 trap extracts value from you. The DSCR threshold isn't a conspiracy. It's a line in your bank's underwriting manual. The threshold exists to protect the bank from loan losses. But the side effect is a mass transfer of property ownership from over-leveraged borrowers to cash-rich buyers who can acquire assets at auction. You see, the buyers aren't your competitors. They're the bank's preferred customers. Private equity firms, real estate investment trusts, sovereign wealth funds. Entities that can write 8-figure checks to buy distressed properties at 20 to 30% discounts, which means the 1.20 trap isn't just a refinancing filter. It's a redistribution mechanism. It moves property from small operators to institutional holders. And it does it legally, quietly, and automatically. The maturity wave is the timeline. The DSCR is the weapon. And the auction block is the transfer point. Your property doesn't disappear, it just changes hands. But even this forced transfer isn't the final layer, because when these properties default, the losses don't just hit the borrowers, they hit the banks, and when the banks start taking losses, they don't get bailed out by the taxpayers anymore. They get bailed in by the depositors, which means your regional bank account is the next target. And in the next section, I'm showing you the exact legal mechanism that allows your bank to seize your capital to cover its commercial real estate losses. The law is called Dodd-Frank Title II, and it's already been used 3 times. The pattern has run twice before. The first time was 1929, the second time was 2008. Both times, the system gave borrowers false hope in the form of a recovery signal. Both times, the recovery signal was a trap. You see, in late 1929, after the October crash, the stock market rallied 12% in November. Economists called it a dead cat bounce. Investors called it a buying opportunity. The public believed the worst was over. It wasn't. By 1932, the market had collapsed another 89%. Banks failed by the thousands. The recovery signal was a mathematical illusion, which means the optimism wasn't organic. It was structural. The market needed to exhale before it could collapse completely. The same pattern appeared in 2008. In the spring of 2008, after Bear Stearns collapsed, the market rallied. Housing prices stabilized. Credit markets unfroze temporarily. The Federal Reserve declared the crisis contained. It wasn't. By September, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy. By October, the entire global banking system was on life support. The recovery signal was another illusion. Plus, the current trajectory mirrors both collapses almost perfectly. In 2025, commercial real estate prices are showing a 12% recovery from their 2023 lows. Office vacancy rates are stabilizing. Regional banks are reporting improved loan performance. The headlines are calling it a soft landing. It's not. You see, the 12% recovery isn't a reversal. It's the exhale. The system is catching its breath before the maturity wave hits in 2026. The math hasn't changed. The debt hasn't disappeared. The 1.20 threshold is still locked in place, which means the optimism you're seeing right now is the same false hope signal that preceded both 1929 and 2008. The cycle doesn't care about American exceptionalism. The cycle doesn't care about Federal Reserve interventions. The cycle runs on debt maturity schedules and refinancing mathematics. And right now, the cycle is at stage 5. The maturity wave doesn't hit all banks equally. The exposure is concentrated in regional banks. These are the institutions that hold the majority of commercial real estate loans in the United States, and their balance sheets are built on a foundation of office buildings, hotels, and retail properties that are currently underwater. You see, large national banks like JP Chase or Bank of America have diversified loan portfolios. Commercial real estate makes up 10 to 15% of their total assets. If CRE defaults surge, they can absorb the losses. Regional banks don't have that luxury, which means for many regional institutions, commercial real estate represents 300% or more of their total equity capital. That's not a typo. Their CRE loan exposure is 3 times larger than the capital cushion they're required to maintain. Plus, regulators have flagged any bank with a CRE to equity ratio above 300% as carrying excessive risk. The designation doesn't trigger immediate action, but it puts the bank on a watch list. And if defaults start accelerating in 2026, those banks move from the watch list to the resolution list. The forensic data reveals exactly where the strain is concentrated. Live Oak Banking Company, CRE to equity ratio, 605.4%. Dime Community Bank, CRE to equity ratio, 550.2%. These aren't outliers. These are representative samples of the regional banking sector's exposure to the 1.20 trap. When the maturity wave forces property owners into default, these banks take the first losses. And when the losses exceed their capital reserves, the FDIC steps in. You see, the FDIC doesn't rescue these banks with taxpayer money anymore. That ended after 2008. The new protocol is called Orderly Liquidation Authority, and it's codified in Dodd-Frank Title II. Dodd-Frank was passed in 2010 as a response to the 2008 financial crisis. The law was marketed as a reform package designed to prevent future bailouts. The headline promise was simple: never again would taxpayers be forced to rescue failing banks. But the fine print revealed something else. You see, Title II of Dodd-Frank didn't eliminate bailouts. It replaced them with bail-ins, which means when a systemically important financial institution fails, the FDIC is authorized to liquidate the bank without using taxpayer funds. Instead, the FDIC converts the bank's liabilities into equity, and the first liability on the list is unsecured creditor claims. Plus, your bank deposit is classified as an unsecured creditor claim. The law is explicit. When you deposit money into a bank, you are legally lending that money to the bank. The bank owes you the debt, but you are not a secured creditor. You are unsecured. Which means, in a liquidation scenario, your deposit can be converted into equity shares of the failing institution. You see, the FDIC insures deposits up to $250,000, but that insurance only applies to retail depositors. If you're a business holding $3 million in operating capital or a property owner holding $2 million in escrow, you are above the insurance threshold. Which means when your regional bank fails due to commercial real estate losses, your deposit above $250,000 gets converted into worthless bank stock. You don't lose your money in a traditional sense. You lose access to it. It gets frozen, restructured, and redistributed as equity in a bank that no longer exists. The mechanism is called a bail-in, and it's already been used 3 times. Cyprus, 2013. Depositors with balances above 100,000 euros lost 47.5% of their capital overnight. Greece, 2015. Capital controls froze deposits for months while the ECB restructured the banking sector. Portugal, 2014. Banco Espírito Santo depositors saw their savings converted into shares of a bridge bank that collapsed 6 months later. Plus, the United States has the legal framework ready. Dodd-Frank Title II is sitting on the shelf, waiting for the trigger event. And the trigger event is a wave of regional bank failures caused by commercial real estate defaults. Most people assume the FDIC will step in and make them whole. They won't. You see, the FDIC's deposit insurance fund holds roughly $125 billion in reserves. That sounds like a large number, but it's not large enough to cover a systemic regional banking crisis. Which means if 20 or 30 regional banks fail simultaneously due to CRE losses, the DIF runs out of money in the first week. And once the DIF is depleted, the FDIC switches to the bail-in protocol. Plus, the banks most at risk are the ones holding your business deposits, your real estate escrow accounts, and your property management reserves. These aren't retail checking accounts with $2,000 balances. These are commercial deposits with 6-figure and 7-figure balances. You see, when Live Oak Banking Company or Dime Community Bank falls into the 1.20 trap and their loan portfolio implodes, the FDIC doesn't bail them out with taxpayer funds. The FDIC bails them in with your capital. Which means the commercial real estate collapse doesn't just destroy property equity, it destroys bank deposits. The losses flow from the borrower to the bank to the depositor. And the legal mechanism that enables this transfer is already embedded in federal law. The maturity wave is the catalyst, the 1.20 ratio is the filter, and Dodd-Frank Title II is the extraction tool. But even this depositor seizure mechanism isn't the final stage, because the system isn't collapsing randomly. It's following a script. And in the final section, I'm showing you exactly what that script says happens next, why 2026 is the mathematical point of no return, and what options you still have if you're holding property or deposits in the blast radius. The math is no longer theoretical, the timeline is no longer abstract, and the window is closing faster than most people realize. The maturity wave tells you when. The 1.20 ratio tells you who. Dodd-Frank. Title II tells you how the losses get transferred. You see, most people will wake up in 2027 and wonder how they lost their equity. They'll ask why their regional bank account was frozen and converted into worthless bank stock. They'll search for answers after the event has already played out. But you are seeing the script before it runs, which means you have a choice that most people won't get. You can reposition your capital before the maturity wave peaks. You can move your deposits out of high-exposure regional institutions. You can exit over-leveraged properties before the DSCR filter locks you out of refinancing. Plus, these mechanisms don't stop at commercial real estate. The same Dodd-Frank authority applies to any systemically important institution. The same bail-in protocol can be triggered by currency crises, sovereign debt defaults, or derivative implosions. The CRE collapse is just the visible crack in the foundation. To stay inside the forensic circle and track these UCC Article 8 and Dodd-Frank triggers as they happen in real time, hit subscribe. We don't do headlines, we do the fine print. And the fine print is where the real transfer of wealth gets documented. The math is no longer sustainable. The 1.20 ratio is the invisible fence that has already trapped trillions in assets. The maturity wave isn't coming. It's here. The defaults aren't theoretical, they're scheduled. You have until the peak hits in 2026. Position yourself accordingly. The script is already written. The only question is whether you read it before the curtain drops, or after.